parts of Latin America has been a huge source of CO2 pollution. Is that being reined in now?
By fits and starts. You know, the Brazilian government has made some efforts, but they have got a lot of other problems, and apparently still a lot of illegal burning going on there. Also, Indonesia, Malaysia, is a big problem.
That also takes away from sequestration. You know,
Yes,
all
it
those
does.
plants
Yes,
that-
anti-sequestration is
Yeah.
the opposite of sequestration.
Yeah.
Yep.
The production of palm oil is deforesting a lot of
Palm
Southeast
oil is
Asia.
nasty stuff. And you know, again, palm oil is a good example because and that right along with ethanol are examples of things that are well intentioned turn out to backfire. They have unexpected consequences. Use of palm oil for biodiesel, use of corn for ethanol, by many calculations, increase the amount of carbon being released into the air when you take into account the effects on agriculture, soil destruction, every step of the way. But these were originally brought in as supposedly clean energy technology.
And ethanol is a net energy loss.
That seems to be the consensus.
And it also increases the cost
That's
of
right.
grain,
Yeah,
which hurts people in developing countries.
yeah.
But it's important to Iowa primary voters.
Right,
Exactly.
that's right.
Yeah, if you could move the first primary to New Mexico, you could probably get rid of ethanol.
Yeah, I think that's a good thought.
Yeah,
Going back to actually your subject, it's how to speak to conservatives about climate change. I'm struck by some of the comments, Doug and Don both referred to leadership. And for those of us that believe that leading by example is an absolutely critical thing to do, how does the argument that America needs to lead, because that's the right thing to do, is to lead by example? Now, it seems to me that at some level that should have some conservative appeal, with the exception of the question will be leading us to what? But is that in fact perhaps a potent way to interact with a conservative? Is to be a leader?
I would think so, if you can persuade your conservative friend you're talking to lead in the right direction.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that. Yeah.
The CCL carbon fee with rebate, it seems to me to be, I agree with you, effective. The single most effective thing we can do is they're all excited about getting 10 congressmen from upstate, from Midwestern northern districts to sign on to that. Is there anything that you know about among conservatives that would be fairly simple, straightforward as these things go, to propose and pass such a fee? Is there any support beyond these few voices in the House for doing any of that?
Yes, but I would say that my problem with my question about the Citizens Climate Lobby, which I share your view that they're one of the better organizations out there. If you took their proposal and put it in a House committee that had people from both parties on it, if people signed on to the tax side, they would get into a debate over how to rebate the money back. And I think that the Citizens Climate Lobby in practice would have to be open to compromise, whether or not how that's going to be rebated. They envisage something like a universal basic income. You just send everybody a check for $4,000 a year, however much it comes back to. The conservatives on the committee are going to say, no, we should use some of this to reduce the payroll tax, because that would increase job formation, increase labor force participation. And some of them are gonna say, you should use some of it to reduce the corporate income tax so that you'd have more incentive for innovation and so forth. So I think that the concept is good. If you actually got down to the horse trading necessary to put some legislation through, you probably were entering into some kind of compromise about what you use the carbon tax revenue for.
But is there, I mean, yeah, I'll understand about the process, but do you sense any possibility of something like that in the next Congress or the next Congress after that?
It's a hard sell, but things can change.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back again to kind of the main topic of talking with conservatives about climate change. I was recently on vacation and in a store talking with a gentleman who seemed very well spoken and articulate, and all of a sudden we started talking about the weather, and he goes off on this theory. I almost didn't believe him that, well, these HARP people, they're controlling the weather just to force this climate change issue. He cites a website I could go to, and I didn't know what to say to this guy. First I thought it was a joke, and then I thought, that's not going to engage. I was in a store, I didn't have time. But back to where you have a denier, an unbeliever, like this gentleman Zink that grew up to the Enterprise recently, it's all a hoax that so many scientists agree. You've given us a framework, but what, when you meet up with one of these people, what is the Cliff Notes version of, is there a source you can direct them to? How do you deal with that when you've only got a few minutes to try and plant a seed? Because, can't take hours.
Okay.
Smile.
Smile.
One thing you can say is to make sure that the person who's making the statement realizes that he or she is a small minority, even among conservative Republicans. The people who think that way are very noisy, I should say. They make their contribution, they make sure that they're heard more than in proportion. And I think that's the part of the problem. I think when you do an opinion poll, you're asking somebody in private, you say, okay, how do you rate yourself? Are you liberal, Democrat, middle of the road, Democrat, so on and so forth? They say, oh, I'm a conservative Republican. Then you ask him in private, you say, well, do you think we should subsidize clean energy technology to help climate change? And he'd say, yeah, I agree with that. Or push the button silently and say, yes, he agrees with it. But if you start talking, and particularly if you're talking in public, this person is going to be afraid that he is a small minority. He's going to be afraid that most of his conservative friends are going to think he's some kind of a kook for endorsing this, and that's not true. Somehow, this small minority of conservatives that believes these flamboyant things has come to dominate the discussion. And you can see it even in the Republican candidates. If you look at what the Republican candidates think about, or say they think, we don't know what they think in their heart of hearts always, but what they say about climate change is that most of them seem to think that that's the way to get the votes in the Iowa caucuses and the New Hampshire primary, is by coming out with a denier line. And probably the person most flamboyantly pushing that line right now is Ted Cruz, although Donald Trump is on it too. But they're fighting over a little slice of the pie, but they make so much noise about it that your friend in the grocery store is going to think, this is what everybody believes because this is all that I hear, especially if he watches Fox News instead of CNN. So if you point to some of these sites that I've got on here, and that's why I wanted to put them on there, is to say, well, read something like Clear Path, which it has a tone and language is very conservative. And this guy is going to look at that, he's going to think he's on familiar territory because they use all the conservative buzzwords. They have an American flag in their logo. and all this stuff. And then he starts reading, he says, wait a minute, why is a conservative worried about climate change? What's this about? I never heard this before.
That's good.
So we should get a little stack of slips to hand it when they run into admirers.
Yeah.
Or, you know,
Yeah, that'd be a good idea. Good idea. I don't think you were gonna run into an Oriana, though, are you?
How too many, probably.
I think there is a problem. We're talking about it, how you deal with it on an intellectual level.
Yeah.
And I think our economy has spent over a century becoming very much carbon-based.
Yeah.
And the guy who owns the gas station doesn't see himself converting to becoming a photoelectric panel salesman. And the big farmer who has $1 million invested in diesel fuel burning farm equipment doesn't have another $1 million to invest in electric vehicles.
Yep.
And many people are in businesses that were started by their grandfather. Then their grandfather was the one that had the innovation. And maybe dad tweaked it a little bit. But they've been sitting on what grandpa and dad did for 30, 40, 50 years.
Yep.
And you want to change things so it won't work.
That's right.
And they know that they can't change, so they don't want it to change. They
Yeah.
don't want this to be true. It's very hard to convince something that's going to turn their whole economic life upside down, unless they're very bright and creative, that is really true. They emotionally need to deny it. And I don't know how you conquer that.
It is very hard to persuade people that things are true that are against their interest to believe. This is known human trait. That's one of the reasons why I favor small, invisible nudges that push people in a direction. For example, if we have a carbon tax, if the diesel fuel is a little more expensive, or even if it's not more expensive, but if we prevent it from getting cheap like it does now, then that gives this guy a reason to think. If diesel fuel goes up in price, he has to think, gosh, do I really need to till that field as many times as I'm tilling it? And maybe I can skip going over the back 40 one time or two times. Or maybe I should look at all that methane that's bubbling out of my manure pond, and I see that this guy next door has a lid over his and he's heating his barn over it, and he's saving money doing it. Maybe I should do the same thing. So yeah, money is one of the ways you can overcome that. So you got to make it in the person's interest, not just telling him that he's a sinner if he doesn't do it, but that he'll be richer if he does do it. That's part of it.
Well, we have to put some of our creative developmental energy into finding ways to help farmers, automobile dealers, evolve.
Yep.
And that's where the carbon fee produces that incentive. It goes up each year incrementally, as Lisa Bono explained. And that gives a person an opportunity to start thinking and making those changes. It's not a bang in the face.
Yeah.
I just came from Arizona, and they've got that same issue that we got with the power companies trying to reduce the amount of rebate solar panel people get. So they've really put a damper on people out in Arizona, which the solar panels should be extremely efficient with all the sun they have. But they're trying to do the same thing out there. It's a big issue, and I don't know where we are in Michigan with that issue. But a lot of And the governor out there has appointed a panel which has strong ties to the power industry. They don't want to pay the retail rate. They want to reduce it so that people would not really get into the solar panels
The
as
feed-in
much.
rate, yeah,
So that's another issue that we're dealing with.
yep.
But I've heard the counter-argument from conservatives which support solar panels and all of that on the grounds of individual choice and kind of consumer sovereignty. Anyway,
Yeah,
Worked real well down in Georgia.
yeah.
all right, well, thanks everyone for engaging.
Ed, when and where will we find this presentation?
When and where will you find this? I
If you
think-
give me the
Yeah,
link,
I'll give Bob the link
I'll
and he'll
put it on
mail
our
it out, number
website.
one. Number two, you can find this, I'm probably gonna post some kind of narrative version of this discussion on my blog. Just Google Ed Dolan's Econ blog and you'll find that. There's also, so I'll send you the link to the slideshow, there'll be a link on there.
Ed, could you also send me a link to
I
your
will.
blog, and I'll put that on our website
Yep.
as well? Thank you.
Are you sending out emails anymore?
Huh?
When you said you'll put it on your blog, on our website.
Did you get the email I sent yesterday?
Yeah,
Okay, so I'm sending out emails.
awesome.
Well, yeah, I can do that too.
But Ed, I think you should take this program, your program, out on the, and give a lot of these. I don't know how many you have given, but it was well done and very well received, obviously.
All right, thank you. If you hear anybody who wants to hear.
I've also been videoing this because there were some whiners that said they were gonna be in Florida and places. So I'm gonna post this on the, I will actually put them on YouTube and then put the link on the website. And I'll put that in an email as well.
Latest book you read.
I probably get lost.
I love the, I love
You think? No, I don't think so. I get too much data and stuff, I think, my scanning is.
I like to get
I'm sort of currently the moderator No, I got both of you. You guys on the list? You bet. Likewise. He's coming with you. Anybody's welcome. Okay. I'm not gonna try to stop
solar panels, because skip over the conventional grid generation. They need something I got an email, I have a friend in Australia. Australia.
wants to. I told him he wanted to. So I brought my little. So anyway, yeah. We're good.